Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Path of Exile to talk. Today I've got a pretty important topic. This is a new character that I've been running for about the last week. It's my ranger, which is of course a deadeye. Through my journey with this ult, I've started to get some really powerful gear and achieve some good DPS. And with that, I've been clearing tier 15s that are even corrupted and irradiated, so I'm pretty happy with where I've got. But through that, I've been experiencing what it is to try to run a build that's really strong in the endgame, but reaching that point where it starts to come online and actually function is a task in itself. Understanding the details of how to get a build online, how to increase its damage, what the traps are, it's things that I've been learning by going through Path of Exile 2, talking about it, discussing it, making videos about it, and here on this ult, I kind of got to apply it. And so I want to talk about some of the things that have come up that might be relevant and useful to more universal other players doing similar. So I hope that these different topics are useful to you because they've been very relevant for me over the last few days. Let's start with the trap that is your skill page and the DPS window in particular. This is a great way to check the kind of damage that you're dealing with an ability, but the numbers go up and down, and sometimes they don't even change when you think they would. So I do think this is a great tool to see how you're doing and see if something's worth including and what's changing. Like for example, I can literally take off this ring and see that the number changes, so I know that this ring is giving me a bit of DPS. But using my brain, I know that there is a lot of value in this because it's my one source of mana per enemy killed, so it's actually super important for my clear, and ultimately being able to cast more abilities regularly because I have the mana is more DPS compared to having no mana or something. In any case, it's a great way to learn how your ability is doing right now in terms of damage, but it is deceptive. Let me explain. A really important part of this build is generating shock, so I'm running conduction. This gives the supported skill 100% more chance to shock. If you take a look at the tooltip, it tells us exactly how this works. Lightning damage from your hits will contribute to the chance to shock an enemy. The higher the lightning damage dealt, the higher the chance. So if I've got like an ultra geared crazy setup, I will have significantly higher lightning damage than someone that doesn't. And so I might not need to run conduction in a super juiced gear because I have enough lightning damage that my chance to shock is high enough. Instead of running conduction, I could run something that actually increases the damage directly. So this is reflected when I take it off. You see that? 4,152. As I put it in, the number stays the same. Meanwhile, when I take out concentrated effect, the number drops greatly. But conduction is giving me a lot more DPS because those enemies that are shocked are taking significantly more damage. And that's going to proc other things, such as when I've got it going, cast on shock. It is very important that I do shock and regularly do so. So conduction is a big DPS increase, despite it not being reflected here in this skill sheet page at all. All I'm really getting at here is that it's a great thing to look at, but sometimes the number doesn't change, even though you are getting a lot of value out of something. So obviously, reading comprehension and applying logic is important here. Another topic that really changes your DPS that I want you to highly value is the concept of skill speed, and then under that you've got like attack speed and cast speed. Is attack speed more for martial weapons and cast speed for more your casters, obviously? But they're very important because as I attack, I'm getting tailwind because I'm a deadeye, and this gives me increased skill speed. Basically, I'm able to send out these attacks faster. So as I've reached 10 stacks, you see that the number actually went up. By having more speed that I'm putting out the damage, that's going to ultimately hit more and deal more damage over time, more damage per second. And as that falls off, we lose the number, it goes down. Basically, having a great base of damage is super important, but being able to put that base of damage out faster is a big damage increase. So by taking like raw physical damage increase and attack speed in relatively good unison, seems to result in better DPS than just having really big attacks that come out super slow or super fast attacks that deal obviously very little damage. There's also a question of diminishing value, where having too much investment in one aspect of damage could be actually better served by modifying that more with a mix, like we're saying with, your cast and attack speed. But obviously that comes up when we start to think about crit. All of your stuff has this like base chance to crit. So here this has 5% as a base because I've got no extra crit chance. And then its base critical damage bonus is plus 100%. What does that actually mean? Well, it tells us the default value is plus 100%, i.e. twice as much damage. So when I get a random crit at this 5% rate, it's going to just hit twice as hard. So this might make you think that you should really engage with crit because, wow, that's really valuable. But it's deceptive, and I just want to warn you about how this could be like a trap for maybe more of a new player. If you want to increase your critical hit chance, you might find like a jewel that gives you 10% more critical hit chance. So that would put us logically to 15% crit hit chance, right? Well, no. It's taking your crit hit chance and then increasing it by 1%. So what's 10% of 5%? 0.5%. So if I got an extra 10% crit hit chance on like a jewel, then I would be at 5.5% critical hit chance, which is not a massive change at all. Is it worth investing for me right now? Probably not. But it's a question of, is it worth it? Some builds absolutely do lean into crit, and it is incredibly valuable as a different way to modify your damage. But there needs to be enough investment to actually see the returns of that investment. And so for me, it's not something worth like putting a little into, but that's what I've been learning about in terms of crit and considering that for my build and some of the stuff that's relevant to the skill sheet. Let's talk about ways that are going to be really cheap and effective at increasing the power of your build. The first thing that's obvious is increasing the level of your skills. If we hover over lightning arrow here, its total level is 24. That's because it's level 19 from the gem itself, and then we have +5 from global modifiers. On my gear, I have +2 levels to all projectile skills. So lightning arrow, as you can see, is a projectile skill. So adding levels to my gems is going to increase the damage that they deal. It will literally scale the attack damage % number here. So that's obviously very valuable. Some skills aren't worth investing levels into as much, so it does depend, but overall it's a good rule to have. The problem is that you actually need these gems to, of course, level up your abilities. And they do have really impactful requirements as you get into these higher levels. The highest level you can have on a skill gem is 20, at least at the base. Technically, we can increase that by adding levels to the skills from our gear, but also you could even corrupt that gem, and instead of giving it an extra socket or quality, it could actually give it an extra level. But obviously, when you val something like a gem, it might do the opposite, like take away a level, take away quality, take away a slot, so it is a risk. Definitely not something I'd recommend blindly doing. If you look at the wiki page for Path of Exile 2, under the gem page, we can get a look at where you actually start to get these level gems. So at level 65 enemies, we're very likely to get level 14 skill gems to drop, and a small chance at level 15. What we care about though is 18, 19, and 20. So we can see at level 74 enemies, you start to get this small chance to actually get level 18 skill gems to drop. At 75, that goes up, and then again at 76. As we hit level 78 enemies then, that's when we start to get the potential of 19 level skill gems to drop. And also level 18 skill gems, the chance is getting quite big now. It's not until enemies are level 82 that we start to get that potential 20th level skill gem. So how do you actually reach enemies of that high enough level? Well, starting with a tier 15 waystone, the enemy level will be 79 on these to begin with. You could corrupt these and maybe get a tier 16, so that will put them to level 80. But we've still got 2 levels to go, right? Well, there are map modifiers that are just on them, like irradiated, so area level has +1 to monster level. And again, we can get that on corruption, but as this is a perfect example here, we can get irradiated and corruption. So that will be +1 to both. So level 79 on a tier 15 would be level 80. Then with corruption, they'd be level 81. So if I was going to put a tier 15 in here, it would tell me monster level 81. Problem is, we want them to be level 82, so we have that potential of a level 20 skill gem, don't we? One thing to consider for that then would be increasing the level of the enemies. For example, when you start to do the boss skill tree in the Atlas, you actually get +1 to the map boss difficulty. So if there was a boss on that level, it would actually be level 82. But because I got 2 points in this, it would actually be level 83, giving me a chance for that skill level 20 gem to drop when killing that boss in this example. Now, alternative to that, you could literally just trade for them on the PoE2 trading website. I believe you need to be level 78 for level 18 skill gems, and level 84 for level 19 ones. So that could also be something to consider. Maybe you've hit level 78, but you haven't found any level 18 skills yet, and you know it'd be a damage bump if you upgraded your gear. So you could go to the trading website and buy one for exalted orbs, and give yourself a damage bump before you ever even found one. This could be done for the whole roster of skills that you're using, giving you a big damage increase for the cost of like less than 10 exalts. So that's an easy, impactful thing to consider. Just be wary, of course, that you need higher stats to upgrade to the next level. Make sure you meet those requirements before you do it. It will tell you when you consider it though. Next up, as a cheap and effective way to increase the power of your skills, is to give them quality, although this depends on the skill. By hovering over the skill gem and holding Alt, it will tell you at the bottom what the additional effects from quality are. If you don't see it on the first page, it might be on the second or other pages, but it will tell you somewhere at the bottom. In this case, it will cause the beams to fire up to one additional enemy near the target, meaning the potential AoE of this skill goes up. That is certainly impactful, important. And since these are two of my most relevant damaging skills, I would want to give them quality as soon as possible. To increase quality of an item, you just need gem cutter prisms, and the current ratio is 2 exalts to 1 gem cutters. So it is indeed a very cheap resource. Just be aware that when you add quality to a skill gem, it gives it 5% quality and caps at 20%, so you only need 4 gem cutters to reach max quality on each skill gem. And remember to check what it says about the quality and what it will give you, and consider whether that would technically increase your output or not. Next up, let's talk about jewels as another super important source of power. Literally, you can still do the same thing with the skill page here. Let's have a look. 18214, as I take this out, I literally lose damage. That is how impactful jewels can be. Direct sources of damage and DPS. In this case, it's increasing my lightning damage for the lightning arrow. That also makes shock more likely, don't forget. It's also increasing the damage with bows in general, enhancing the power of the skill. The other two things, not so relevant sadly. But be aware that each jewel can have up to 4 modifiers on it unless you corrupt it, where you could give it a new inherent or a 5th modifier if the corruption goes your way. But these can be incredibly useful for the build and maybe even in indirect ways. For example, I talked about how I need mana regen. This sapphire here means I get 1% of my mana back every enemy I kill. That is hugely helpful so I can continue to actually send out attacks. But also here is that percent increase to freeze buildup, which is really important for my build as I said earlier. I need to be freezing targets. I don't have enough of it in my build. What I would really like is this notable here that gives me, extra cold damage and percent increased freeze buildup. But since this is really expensive and I'm working on that, in the meantime, I can run a couple jewels that give me that 20% from much cheaper. So not only can I get literal percent damage increases, but things that enable my build, which is absolutely fantastic. They're a super relevant, potent source of power, and so ideally you want as many of them as you can get without sacrificing other things, and then potent jewels in the sets. As a little reminder then, these are an item and you can craft on them. So we could make them magical, add modifiers to them. We could even take a regal orb and make it a rare, giving another thing. You could exalt this to the 4 cap. And then also you could potentially corrupt it just to see what would happen if it's something you're willing to risk and basically delete, and maybe you get a good result. But in general, you want to run jewels that are a rare status with 4 modifiers on them at least. And those 4 modifiers you make as relevant to your build as you can. Now, another topic on how to deal more damage is a funny one because we're looking at resistances and basically reaching cap. Everyone should probably know this at this point. You want 75% in everything or as close to that as you can get. By being at these resistance caps, you take less damage, you survive, and because you're not dead, you're able to deal damage, right? But you also don't want a super overcap on them. For example, I could increase the power of my build right now by losing some lightning resistance. I have 91% and I only need 75%. So right now, I could lose 16% and put it into something else. Before I was wearing these unique gloves, I was wearing these ones. And as you can see, I was super overcapped on fire, overcapped on lightning, overcapped on chaos, and cold as well, which gave me the room to put on these gloves that are a massive damage increase, but don't actually provide me any resistances, as another great example of that. A pretty cheap resource that you can help get to these resistance caps is by using Breach Catalyst to add quality to your jewelry. You can see that I've got chaos modifiers on this chaos ring, so the percent of the chaos resistance I've got has slightly gone up because I've done that. This is done using these resources, the different catalysts, and I used a chaos one to do that. So in the case of this other ring that I've not done it with, I could enhance the cold because I might increase the cold resistance and also the cold damage increase that we have here too. So let's take that and put it on our ring. Just 1% quality wasn't enough to make a change, and neither was 2%. I'd need to get a little bit higher before we see those numbers go up. So you can buy these on the currency exchange, and they're not expensive either. They're under the breach tab, and so the one I want here is the toll. Right now the market ratio is almost 5 of these catalysts for 1 exalted orb. So let me say I've got 1 exalted orb, and just like that, for 1 exalted orb, I now have 7 of these catalysts. They're that cheap. So I've got 39 cold res and 13% cold damage. Let's just spam a bunch of these catalysts into this. Now I've got 40% cold resistance, 14% increased cold damage. So I've just gained a bunch of percent of cold resistance and a percent of increased cold damage. Because of that, my damage has slightly gone up, and now I'm even more overcapped on cold, which means I can lose even more percent cold resistance on my bell without issue, helping me make that changeover even easier. Now on that note, you do need resources to do all of this stuff, so I just want to remind you that you might have stuff that's worth more than you realize. For example, you might be sat on a pile of chaos orbs, val orbs. Maybe you've got like a massive pile of lesser jeweler orbs. Maybe your gem cutter prisms you don't need anymore because you've got like your quality cap. There's armor scraps, blacksmith whetstones, artificer orbs, the arcanist etchers. These are all worth something. If you have a big stack of them, you can easily sell half of what you've got or like an amount that you wouldn't need and just convert them into cash you can actually do something with in the case of exalted orbs. This is exactly what I'm doing here. And I plan to use that exact resource to go buy a belt to change my setup and upgrade it. Maybe get a bit more DPS or a better setup. With that currency, I could also buy more of the quality upgrades for my skills, the catalyst to improve my jewelry, or maybe like a 19th level skill gem to improve one of my skills. On that note, I want to show you the trading website and just a really simple trick that I think is really important right now. I'm just searching for belts as we talked about, and almost instantly we're looking at divines. 5 exalted orbs or 1 divine. This is ridiculous. If we take a look at the currency exchange right now, I want to see what the value of a divine actually is. So right now, the value of 1 divine orb is roughly 100 exalted orbs. So I could buy a belt for 5 exalted orbs or 100 exalted orbs. That's a massive jump. The reason for that is because the website currently lists divine orbs as about the value of say 8 or 9 exalted orbs for some reason. We're hoping for an update where they fix this, but in the meantime, do not get baited by this. Under filters, you can go to trade filters and then go to buyout price and then just put in exalted orbs. And so now it only shows me stuff that's sold for exalted orbs. So the second listing instead of a divine orb is for 10. So this is way, 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 way cheaper. And suddenly there's things that are relevant to me for actually reasonable prices. One final thing that I'd like to tell you about is the importance of specific item types, white items, that good bases that you could alch and maybe get something worth selling. Commonly, those are going to be items that are like jewelry because those are going to be very valuable items. It's possible that you could take something like a prismatic ring and then alch it and get something really valuable. In this case, I probably didn't. But if I have a stack of alchs, it's worth rolling the dice. I'd recommend this on prismatic rings, amethyst rings, the chaos ones, and especially the gold ones because everyone's after rarity these days. But another thing you can be doing regularly is attempting an orb of chance. This takes a normal item and turns it into a unique or destroys it. Now, there are 3 items that I'd recommend trying this on. There's sapphire rings, which is the cold ones, these ones. There's the stellar amulets, and then there's the heavy bell. The heavy bell might become a really valuable unique called Headhunter, which is worth a lot of divines, and I actually want to use it in this build. So whenever I find a heavy belt that's white, I attempt an orb of chance on it. And as you can see, every time I've tried, it has deleted the item, unfortunately. But there's that chance that I turn it into Headhunter and suddenly make a lot of value, whether I'm going to use it or sell it. And that's generally what they're used for. So the 3 I'd recommend you do this on: sapphire ring, stellar amulet, and heavy belts. If you have the spare resources, you might make something you sell for good money. On that note, you might be finding items that have tier 2 or tier 3 next to their name. What this means is that it's a higher base. So whatever affixes it's got rolled on it, they could be a higher tier. So let's say you got an item that was a tier 3 and it had some sort of element resistance on it. The number of that element resistance might be actually quite high because that was a tier 3 item. If you were to get a base item that's like a tier 3, you could find something that is worth selling or even using. So if you do have the spare resources, that's something to consider, but I wouldn't recommend ever really exalting anything because those currencies are used for trading and you could just get something that's literally perfect for you without any RNG. It's only spare resources that aren't worth much that I would use to roll the dice on a good base. But yeah, that's just a bunch of different topics and things that I've been dealing with while playing this ranger that I hope are handy or useful to know. If you guys have any other relevant tips, maybe let us know in the comments. But for now, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.